Los Angeles, July 1945. The thermometer outside Bob Wells's bungalow read 104 degrees. Inside felt hotter. The war had ended 3 weeks ago, and America was trying to remember what peace felt like. But on this Tuesday afternoon, the only thing Bob Wells could think about was not melting into his living room floor. He sat at his piano, shirt soaked through, staring at a piece of paper where he'd scribbled 4 words: chestnuts roasting on an open fire. "What are you doing?" Mel Tormé asked, stepping through the door without knocking. That's how it was with them. Best friends since childhood, creative partners, the kind of friendship where doors were always open and ideas were always shared. Trying not to die of heat stroke, Bob said, not looking up. "I'm thinking about winter, cold things. Snow, anything to feel less like I'm being cooked alive." Mel looked at the paper. "Read the line." "And then something happened that would change music history forever." "That's good," Mel said. "That's really good. Can I see that?" What happened in the next 40 minutes would create a song that 80 years later, billions of people would still be listening to every December. But it would start with 2 men trying to survive a heat wave by imagining the coldest day of the year. Before we dive into the story of how the most beloved Christmas song of all time was written in less time than it takes to watch a sitcom, let me ask you something. When was the last time you created something great, not because you planned it, but because you needed to escape something unbearable? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because this story about accidental genius and the song Nobody Believed in is universal. Mel Tormé was 19 years old in the summer of 1945, but he'd already lived several lifetimes in the music business. Child prodigy, radio performer by age 4, singer, arranger, drummer, pianist. He'd done it all, and the industry knew his name even if the general public was still catching up. People called him the Velvet Fog because of his smooth voice, though he hated the nickname. Too precious, too manufactured. He just wanted to make good music. Bob Wells was older, late 20s, a lyricist who'd been grinding in Hollywood for years. Some success, some near misses. He and Mel had been collaborating, trying to crack the code of what made a song stick. The war ending had created a strange emotional atmosphere in America. Joy, certainly. Relief, absolutely. But also exhaustion. A generation had spent years afraid, rationing, grieving. Now it was over, and everyone was supposed to just return to normal. Nobody quite knew. Mel had spent the war performing for troops, writing songs, trying to contribute while his friends went to fight. Some hadn't come back. He carried that weight quietly. Bob's brother had been killed at Normandy. He'd received the telegram 6 months ago. The pain was still raw, still impossible to process. Writing helped. Not writing about the grief directly, but writing about anything else, escape through creation. That's what Bob was doing when Mel arrived. Escaping. The heat made it easier somehow. When you're physically uncomfortable, your mind goes elsewhere. Anywhere else. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire, Bob had written. Then below it, Jack Frost nipping at your nose. Images of cold, of comfort. Of Christmases before the war, when the world felt safer and holiday songs didn't carry the weight of all the people who wouldn't be there to hear them this year. Mel sat down at the piano bench beside Bob. Picked up the paper. Read it twice. "This could be something," Mel said. "It's just me trying to cool down by thinking about December." "No, I mean it. This could be a song." Bob looked at him. "A Christmas song? In July?" "Why not? When else are we supposed to write them?" "In December, we're too busy performing them." That was true. The music business ran on strange timelines. You recorded Christmas albums in summer so they'd be ready for release in fall. But still, sitting in 104-degree heat writing about snow and chestnuts felt absurd. "Nobody's going to want a new Christmas song," Bob said. "The old ones work fine. People like what they know." Mel studied the words again. Something about them felt different. Not clever exactly, not trying too hard, just honest. Simple images that created a feeling rather than telling you how to feel. "Let me try something," Mel said, and his fingers found the piano keys. The melody came fast, almost too fast, like it had been waiting inside the piano for someone to discover it. Warm, nostalgic, a little bit sad in that way that Christmas songs often are. Because Christmas isn't just about joy, it's about longing, about missing people, about hoping this year might feel like the years you remember, even though it never quite does. Bob started writing lyrics to match the melody Mel was creating. They worked in a kind of creative fugue state, each feeding off the other's energy. Mel would play a phrase, Bob would add words. Bob would suggest an image, Mel would find the musical line that made it sing. Yuletide carols being sung by a choir, Bob wrote, and folks dressed up like Eskimos, Mel added, playing with the rhythm. They were building something, not just a song, but a whole world. A perfect Christmas that existed only in imagination. No war, no grief, no complexity. Just simple pleasures, fire, snow, family, togetherness. 30 minutes in, they had a verse and chorus. 40 minutes in, they had the whole thing. Complete. Finished. A song that felt like it had always existed, like they'd just been the ones lucky enough to find it. Mel played it through one more time. Bob listened, hearing his words sung back to him in Mel's velvet voice, and something caught in his throat, because the song wasn't just about Christmas. It was about every Christmas his brother would never see, every family gathering with an empty chair, every carol sung by people trying to find joy despite everything they'd lost. That's the song, Mel said quietly when he finished. That's it? Bob nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They sat in that hot bungalow for a while longer, neither of them quite ready to acknowledge what they'd just created. Songs were just songs until someone else heard them. Until then, they were private magic, but songs needed to be heard to matter. And that meant recording. Mel knew exactly who should sing it. Nat King Cole was already a name in 1945, though not yet the household name he'd become. The King Cole trio was popular in jazz circles, and Nat's smooth voice had started getting attention beyond just instrumental work. Mel and Nat knew each other through the LA music scene, mutual respect between artists who understood craft. Mel called him that evening. "I've got a song for you." "What kind of song?" Nat asked. His voice over the phone had that same warmth it had on record, like honey poured over gravel, a Christmas song, but not like the old ones. Something new? There was a pause. Nat was calculating. Christmas songs were tricky. The standards, White Christmas, Silent Night, the classics, those were what people wanted. New Christmas songs rarely broke through, and recording them was a risk. You used studio time and money for something that would only get played 1 month a year if it got played at all. "Come over tomorrow?" Nat said. "Let me hear it." Mel and Bob showed up at Nat's house in Hancock Park the next afternoon. The neighborhood was still mostly white, and Nat living there was itself a statement. A quiet insistence that he belonged anywhere his talent could buy him access to. The fact that some neighbors wished he'd leave was their problem, not his. Maria Cole answered the doorbell. "Bob." "Come in." Nat's at the piano. The house was beautiful, tasteful, the kind of place that said, "We've made it," without shouting. Photos on the wall, awards on the mantle, evidence of a career built through relentless work and undeniable talent. Nat sat at his grand piano, hands resting on the keys. He looked tired. He'd been performing constantly, recording, trying to build something that would last. The music business was beginning to pay attention to him, but attention wasn't the same as respect. He was still fighting for both. "So let's hear this Christmas song," Nat said. Mel sat at the piano, played the melody, sang the lyrics in that smooth voice that made even simple words feel profound. Nat listened without moving. When Mel finished, he asked him to do it again. Mel obliged. This time Nat's eyes were closed, hearing it differently, imagining his own voice on those notes, testing whether the song fit him or whether he'd have to force it. When Mel finished the second time, Nat opened his eyes. "That's beautiful," he said simply. "You think it could work?" Bob asked. "I think it's the best Christmas song I've heard in years. But," he paused, "who's going to record it?" "We were hoping you would," Mel said. Nat stood up from the piano, walked to the window, looked out at his neighborhood, at the California sunshine, at a world that was slowly adjusting to peace, but hadn't figured out what peace meant yet. "Nobody wants new Christmas songs," Nat said finally. "The labels, the radio stations, they want the standards. The songs everyone knows. Recording something new is a gamble." "We know," Mel acknowledged. "More than a gamble," Nat continued. "It's studio time I could use for songs that'll get played year-round. Christmas songs, if they work at all, you get 1 month, December. That's it. The math doesn't make sense." Bob and Mel exchanged glances. They'd expected this. The business logic was sound. Why risk something new when the old worked fine? But Nat wasn't finished. He turned back from the window, and there was something in his expression that hadn't been there before, a kind of determination mixed with something softer. "Memory, maybe. My daughter's 2 years old," Nat said quietly. "Cookie, that's what we call her. Natalie, but she's Cookie to us. And I've been thinking about what kind of world she's growing up in." He sat back down, but not at the piano. In an armchair, like he needed to work through something. When I was a kid, Christmas meant singing at my father's church in Chicago, gospel music. My father was a Baptist minister, and Christmas Eve service was the highlight of the year. Joy and faith and family all mixed together. The choir singing "O Holy Night" so beautifully it made you believe in miracles. My mother baking sweet potato pie. My brothers and I staying up too late, too excited to sleep. That was Christmas. Pure. Uncomplicated. He paused, lost in the memory. Maria stepped closer, one hand resting gently on the back of his chair. Then I got into jazz. Nat continued, and Christmas became about performing at clubs, making money during the busy season. Playing piano while drunk people celebrated around me. Good money, sure. But I stopped thinking about what Christmas actually meant. It became business. Another gig, another paycheck. His voice got softer, but now I've got Cookie. And last Christmas, she was just over a year old, barely walking. We set up a tree, hung stockings, did the whole thing, and she didn't understand any of it yet. Didn't care about presents or Santa or any of that. But she sat on my lap while I played piano, and she smiled. Just smiled at the music, at the lights, at being held. And I realized she's going to grow up in a world that's just come through hell. A world that's still figuring out how to be gentle again. He looked directly at Mel and Bob now. I want her to have Christmas the way I remember it. Not the commercial version, not the version where it's just another gig or another reason to spend money. I want her to have the magic of it, the warmth, the impossible idea that for one night the world could be perfect. That families gather, that love wins, that tomorrow will be better than today. He looked at Mel and Bob. Your song does that. It's not religious, not sentimental in a cheap way. It's just, on it describes a perfect Christmas, like it's something real, something achievable, even though we all know it's not. So you'll record it? Mel asked. I'll record it, Nat said. But not because I think it'll be a hit, because it's the kind of song I want to exist in the world my daughter's growing up in. That kind of reasoning doesn't show up in contracts or royalty statements, but it's the reason some of the best art gets made. Not because someone calculated the return on investment, but because someone believed in adding beauty to the world even if beauty doesn't always pay the bills. Capitol Records was less enthusiastic. When Nat approached them about recording the Christmas song, the executives were skeptical. Nat, you're building momentum. Why waste a session on a Christmas song? It gets played 1 month a year if you're lucky, because it's a great song, Nat said. Great doesn't mean commercially viable. That's not how we build careers. Then I'll pay for the session myself, Nat offered. That got their attention. If Nat was willing to put his own money on the line, maybe there was something there. Fine, they agreed. 1 session. But if it doesn't test well, we're not putting marketing behind it. And Nat recorded the Christmas song in August 1946. Summer again, different summer, but same heat. The studio was Capitol Records' legendary Studio A, where they'd captured some of the best recordings of the decade. But even with air conditioning trying its best, the room was warm, musicians in shirt sleeves, jackets draped over chairs. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, singing about winter wonderlands while sweating through their clothes. The arrangement was lush. String section, subtle orchestration, nothing that competed with Nat's voice, but everything that supported it. The arranger had built a cushion of warmth around the melody, gentle and enveloping. The goal was to create a feeling of intimacy, like someone was singing to you personally in your living room rather than performing for a crowd. Nat stood at the microphone, sheet music in front of him, though he'd already memorized every word. This was his ritual. The paper was a security blanket more than a necessity. The first take was technically perfect. Pitch immaculate, phrasing elegant, timing precise, all correct. But when it played back through the control booth speakers, something was missing. The warmth was there, the beauty was there, but not the magic. Again, Nat said into the talkback mic. The second take had more warmth, but less precision. He'd relaxed into it, let his voice settle deeper into the melody, but he'd sacrificed some of the technical perfection, and it felt like a trade rather than a fusion. Better, but not there yet. Nat shook his head again. One more. The engineer was getting frustrated. They'd been at this for hours. Studio time was expensive. The clock was ticking. But Maria, who'd come to the session and was sitting in the control booth, understood what Nat was chasing. Not perfection, something else. Truth, the feeling you get when you're not performing anymore, but just being. Take your time, she said through the talkback. Nat looked through the glass, saw her face, and nodded. The third take almost worked. Almost. The strings swelled at exactly the right moment. His voice found pockets of emotion in phrases he'd sung twice before. But there was still something calculated about it, like he was building the performance brick by brick instead of letting it flow. One more, Nat said, and this time there was something different in his voice. Determination mixed with surrender. The fourth take started the same way the others had, chestnuts roasting on an open fire, but somewhere around Jack Frost nipping at your nose, Nat stopped thinking. Stopped trying to get it right and just let the song sing itself through him. He closed his eyes. In his mind, he wasn't in a studio in August. He was in his father's church in December. He was holding Cookie last Christmas, feeling her small weight against his chest. He was remembering every perfect Christmas moment from his childhood, every impossible hope for the future, every longing for a world that was gentler than the one they were living in. His voice settled into the melody like it had been custom built for these notes. The warmth wasn't performed, it was present, real. When he sang, and so I'm offering this simple phrase to kids from 1 to 92, his voice caught slightly, not a mistake, but genuine emotion breaking through professional polish. The strings seemed to respond, the musicians feeling what Nat was feeling and following him into that emotional space. The whole studio became a single breathing organism, creating something together that none of them could have created alone. When Nat sang the final Merry Christmas to You, and the strings faded into silence, nobody moved for a long moment. Then the engineer spoke through the intercom. That's the one. Nat knew it too. That was the take where the song stopped being notes and became something living. Capitol released the Christmas song in November 1946, and at first, nothing happened. Radio played it occasionally but kept returning to White Christmas and the classics. The public seemed indifferent. Why choose the unknown over Bing Crosby? Nat tried not to be disappointed. He'd believed in the song, done his best. Sometimes that wasn't enough, but then people started requesting it. Not many at first, just a few calls to radio stations. Then a few more. Then enough that programmers noticed. The song was growing slowly, organically, not because of marketing, but because people who heard it wanted to hear it again, wanted it to be part of their Christmas. By December 1947, it was getting regular rotation. By 1948, it was a standard. By 1950, people argued it had always been there. The song had achieved the impossible. It felt timeless from the moment it appeared. Mel Tormé and Bob Wells watched their 40-minute composition become part of the cultural fabric. They'd write other songs, have other successes. But the Christmas song would be their legacy. Nat King Cole recorded it 3 times over his career, each version slightly different. But that first version from August 1946, where he finally stopped trying and just sang, remained definitive. His daughter Cookie, who became Natalie Cole, grew up hearing that song every Christmas. It was her lullaby, her tradition, her connection to a father who was often traveling, but always present in that voice singing about chestnuts and Jack Frost. When Nat died in 1965, the Christmas song had already outlived most popular music from the 1940s. It showed no signs of fading, because here's what they'd created in that hot bungalow in 40 minutes. Not just a song, but a feeling. Not just lyrics and melody, but a perfect Christmas that exists only in imagination and is more real because of it. No war in that Christmas, no grief, no complexity. Just simple joys, warmth when it's cold outside, family together, children dreaming, the Christmas we all wish we could have, described so perfectly that for 3 minutes, we believe we do. Today, the Christmas song has been recorded over 2,000 times by different artists. It's been streamed billions of times. It plays in every mall, every radio station, every home that celebrates Christmas. They don't know that Capitol Records almost didn't release it. They don't know that Nat King Cole believed in it because he wanted his daughter to grow up in a world where this song existed. They don't know that it started as 2 men escaping a heat wave by imagining winter. But maybe that's the point. The best art erases its own origin story. The Christmas song doesn't belong to Mel and Bob anymore. It doesn't even belong to Nat, though his voice will forever be the one most people hear. It belongs to everyone who's ever needed to believe that perfect Christmases are possible. That somewhere, chestnuts are roasting and children are sleeping peacefully while visions of sugar plums dance. That the world can be simple and good and warm, if only we imagine it hard enough. That's the magic of the song they wrote in 40 minutes on the hottest day of summer. Not that it describes Christmas as it is, but Christmas as it should be. And in that gap between reality and dream lies the power of music to make us believe temporarily that anything is possible, even peace, even joy, even a perfect Christmas created in the imagination of two men sweating through a July afternoon and brought to life by a voice smooth as velvet, warm as fire, timeless as tradition itself.